Hello friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. Alright, I am on the fourth day of my trip back to Texas. I'm actually just across the border from Texas in New Mexico, southern New Mexico to be specific, and we intentionally made it a point to make it to Carlsbad, New Mexico last night so that I could start out this vlog as early as possible this morning. We are going to visit one of the great cave systems in North America, the Carlsbad Caverns. Now, you know I've been to a couple of cave systems in Texas and thoroughly enjoyed them. This is the granddaddy of them all. We went here when I was a kid many years ago, and it's left an impact on me even to this day, and probably is a key factor of me being such a fan of geology. So when we passed through here about 5 years ago, when Jordan and I were heading to Texas, I kind of thought, oh, it's Carlsbad. Oh man, it'd be great to go visit Carlsbad Caverns. Well, we're going to do that today. So let's go. This is going to be great. Yep, this must be the place. All right, we're in the elevator on the way down to the caverns, and that's the number of feet we've dropped. We're going way down. 300 feet. Wow. They have kind of a model up in the museum up top that kind of showed the proximity of the caves to the visitor center, and it showed that the visitor center was way above the cave system itself, but you don't really get the feeling of that until you actually get in the elevator and start going down. It's almost 800 feet down. Insane. Alright, this is the main area here. Now there's two parts to this. There's kind of this self-guided thing, which I'm on now, and then there's a tour guide of what they call the big room, and we wait here, and I have an appointment at 10:30, but until then we're going to just kind of wander around and check this place out. Like I said, we're like 800 feet below the level of the surface level here, so it's a little dark in here, but you can see all the stalactites from the ceiling. You see they got stalagmites and stalactites, and I guess the stalactites are the ones that hang down from the ceiling, and then these ones here on the ground are stalagmites. Now, I've talked about this before. Much of the central part of the United States is it was at one point the bottom of a shallow sea, and over the millions and millions of years, the creatures that lived in that sea died, and when they died, they sank to the bottom and eventually compressed into limestone. And that's what a lot of this is down here, is limestone. Now, at some point, little cracks and crevices appeared, and slightly acidic water seeped in and basically dissolved away all the soft limestone. Wow, look at the size of this room. Just for the record, that's like 50 yards to the other side there, and probably 100 feet to the top. It's so quiet in here, you can actually, I hear water dripping on the other end there. See what I mean about this being the grandfather of all cave systems? I was talking about how tall this ceiling is. That's got to be 500 feet up there. It's kind of a trip having the whole place to myself. There's like nobody in here. Like I can see, like I said, I can still hear the water dripping in here, and that's how actually all these stalactites form. Is water kind of seeping through the limestone, and it dissolves the limestone and then drips through the ceiling, and as it drips, the limestone, it solidifies into these magnificent formations. Look at all these little holes and crevices in here. See if we can get the camera to focus here for us. There we go. It's almost too dark for the camera. All the weird little crevices in here. Just little holes into nowhere up there. That's right above us. I don't know what's on the other side of that, but there's a lot of plumbing over there. Making a bit of noise. So I think I'm back to kind of where I started here, so this area seems off limits, so what's in here? I'm guessing that's the restrooms, because that says the restrooms here. I'm guessing that's not a natural feature. Well, the cave itself is probably natural, but let's head back this way here and go one of the directions we didn't go before. One of the things I've noticed in here, and it's pretty common in a lot of cave systems, is they really aren't designed for people that are tall like me. You kind of have to duck a little bit to get under things. But then, like I said, you get to a place like this, and it opens up, and no claustrophobia in here. Like I said, we were here a minute ago because we just went through here, but we're going to go off in one of the other directions this time. So the path splits into 2 points here. You can go that way, and I guess there's a natural entrance to the cave some point. And I know that because I've actually been there. And you can go that way, and it'll take you to the natural entrance. Or we can go this way, and this goes into the big room. And we're going to go see the big room here. I think this is where we're going to go with a guided tour a little later. And so we'll probably learn a little bit more about this. But look at that above us. Like I said, that's 50, 75 feet up. Now there's some tunnels out in here that are kind of off limits because there's a colony of bats that live down here, And we visited here in the summer when I was a kid many, many years ago. And we came in kind of the early evening to see the bats come out of the cave, and it was very impressive. You may recall when I did that bat colony in Huntsville, Texas, it was much like that. And so, like I said, there's that natural entrance that was on the other fork in that path that we didn't take, and that was obviously the way the bats come out. But like I said, there's certain parts of the cave that are off limits because it's where the bats live, but I'm guessing at this point there probably aren't any bats down here because they've probably all moved south for the winter. That's kind of cool. Look right there. That one stalactite is like inches away from meeting up with a stalagmite below it. I'm going to get the camera to keep focus here. There we go. Eventually that's what happens is anything that drips off the stalactite and falls to the ground will begin forming a stalagmite on the ground. And eventually they kiss, for lack of a better term, and it forms a column. And so you'll see columns all over the place. And columns are where the stalactite and the stalagmite have met. Now, if I remember correctly, it says it takes about 100 years for one of these columns to grow an inch. So you see ones like that one right there that's probably 10 feet long. You can imagine how long it took for that to grow. And look at all of that. It's just gorgeous back here. Look at all those thin columns coming down from the ceiling here. Let's zoom in on that, see if we can. There, we got it to focus. Look at all those. Just hundreds and hundreds of stalactites coming down. There's a stalactite that's about to kiss the stalagmite below it. The one on the top, that's probably 12 feet. And then look at this one. This one's just massive. And look at that thing. Imagine how long it took that thing to form. Remember, an inch every 100 years or something like that. Might even be wrong on that. It might be longer. But from the peak of that thing up there, all the way down to the ground, that's got to be 30, 40 feet. Maybe more. Amazing. Alright, this is called the lion's tail. They call it lion's tail, stalactite, and popcorn. I guess I can sort of see why they call it popcorn. That sort of does look like popcorn, doesn't it? Alright, and they call these the largest stalagmites in the cave. And there's a little sign here for them. Basically says, we all start small. The trio of stalagmites before you each began as a single drop of water. Drip water came from the surface as rain and snow and melted snow. It became slightly acidic as it absorbed carbon dioxide from the air and the soil. This acidity dissolved the calcite out of the limestone as it flowed down along cracks and pores. As fast dripping water splashed to the floor, calcite formed thin layers around the point of impact. This piled up into the shape of a dome. Slowly the trio grew higher and higher, and now they're the largest stalagmites in the cave. That's wild. This is the kind of thing you'd expect to see at Disneyland or something, but this is real. And that's 50, 75 feet above us there. And probably a good 20 feet in diameter at the base. Yeah, that's millions and millions of years of work there. See, there's a place right there where the stalagmite and the stalactite have joined together and formed a column. And another one that's slowly getting there. It's cool, the different kind of appearance. Some of them are really kind of smooth and flat like that one. That one's kind of weird because it almost looked like somebody froze like some thick liquid coming out of like a tree or something like that and just kind of froze in place. But then you get down here and they're rougher, more coarse. Can't even really see that one's dark in here. This area is called Fairyland. They're calling it popcorn-covered stalagmites. Kind of does look like a little fairy village, doesn't it? These are all really small. They're only a couple of feet tall. There's a big column right there, going all the way from the ceiling all the way down to the floor. And that's probably a good 30 or 40 feet from top to bottom. Another column right there. So another view of the fairy village from another angle. Look at that thing over there. That's kind of amazing. Kind of like the little layers of it coming down there. Look at the point on that thing. Wouldn't want one of those things to break off and impale me. That would hurt. Probably more than hurt. I keep looking at that thing, and it looks like some sort of an alien head or something like that. Let's see if we can get him to focus here. Yeah, I don't know. Make what you will of that. Get back here to this angle here. Keep thinking it looks like, almost looks like a devil or something like that. Got the two horns here and here. A couple eyes right there. Some fangs at the bottom. Kind of scary looking, isn't it? The thing here look like big giant eggs. Now, one of the things I remember from other cave systems I've been in, they ask you not to touch the stalactites because apparently the acid in your fingers will cause the stalactites to stop growing. But I don't see any signs around here on some of these, and they're right along the pathway here, so makes you wonder if maybe some of the stuff that's accessible here isn't growing anymore anyway, so to let you touch it. I remember like for when I went into the inner space caverns, they specifically said there's one stalactite you can touch because it's already dead, but they didn't want you touching any of the others. Look at all the layers and intricate detail on all that. Well, according to this, we haven't even made it to the big room yet. I thought this was the big room. Makes you wonder how big the big room is. Okay, well, let's keep going here. Like I said, I got a tour of the big room, so I got to kind of keep track of time here so we make sure we make it back to our meeting spot. The smooth, flat calcite floor around the edge of the pool is called shelfstone. It marks the water levels of the past. Shelfstone starts out as a paper-thin sheets of calcite that form over the surface of a quiet pool and float like rafts. These rafts can be attached to the edge, creating a platform. The water flows down the cave walls or stalactites into the pools, and rafts become thicker as they grow outward towards the center. So you can kind of see a little bit of that there. There's actually some water down there. Look at that one. That one goes way, way, way up there and way, way, way down. Wow. Look at all that above us. That's the one mistake you're going to make if you come down here. You got to look up. Because that's half the action here. Okay, so I was seeing that out there. I don't know if you can see it. It looks like there's like a rope or something coming down. And apparently that's what it is. There's a little sign here, vast network of dark passages and secret rooms beckon just beyond our reach. In 1985, a small team of cavers used helium balloons to lift a climbing rope high into the dome. With patience, ingenuity, and a bit of luck, they snagged a lofty stalactite. After several tries, the ascent revealed a large passageway above the big room they named the Spirit World, a place where few have since stood. In 2014, cavers climbed to still higher level that they named Halloween Hall. What wonders above our heads still wait to be revealed. So yeah, they went way up into some of those holes up there. Another kind of beautiful part of the cave, just one of the walls you might miss if you're not watching. There's also a pool of water over right about there. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there is still some water in here. A little bit of water down there too. You can see the reflection off of it. And the really amazing thing is all the greatness is not necessarily above us. Look at this. There's a ladder here going way, way, way down there. I can't even see the bottom. But apparently an explorer in 1924 built this ladder out of basically fence wire and sticks and used it to climb way, way, way down there. I don't know, those sticks look kind of rickety. I don't know if I'd want to go on that ladder today. I guess it is lucky that they had that piece of pipe stuck in the ground there that you could tie off on. Unfortunately, the camera doesn't do justice to a lot of this. All of those structures you see there are probably 75 to 100 feet away. And wow, look down here. Holy cow. That's got to be a good 150 feet down. See if we can get a better angle of that here. Unfortunately, it's really dark in here. See, that probably ties into that little ladder we saw here a little bit ago. That's how you get down there. I love those kind of flat sheet-like structures you see up there. Those are so beautiful. I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but there's a lot of like little sparkles in there. It's really beautiful. So I just noticed that the battery I'm using is starting to die, so I'm going to probably end this part of the video here because I got one more battery and I want to get as much of the guided tour as possible. So this will be kind of our final look at the caverns from just a self-guided point of view, but we'll be back shortly with the guided tour, which I'm sure will be really fascinating. See you then.
We're going to talk about how humans have impacted the cave. But before we get to that, let's talk about how this cave was formed. So 250 million years ago, New Mexico was completely underwater. In that water were organisms that took the calcite out of the water to create their bones and shells. Over time, the organisms died, went down to the bottom of the water, eventually forming a layer of limestone. The water evaporated away, uplift occurred, cracks formed in the earth, rainwater came in through the cracks, mixed with petroleum to create sulfuric acid, dissolved the limestone, and we're left with the cave. So that's how the cave formed. Now the bats have been here for a long time, but besides the bats, who saw this cave first? So feel free to explore this room here. And when you're done, take a seat. Feel free to explore this room. And whenever you're done, take a seat. Either a banner or a guillotine. Look. What do you guys think? Who do you think saw this cave first? Any ideas?
Cave dwellers.
No one went in the cave yet. But who saw it? Like saw the cave from the
Was
outside?
it that White, Mr. White?
Even before that. So yeah, there were Native Americans that were here. We know that because they left signs. The rock art panel, just a few switchbacks down the natural entrance. Many other signs were left as well. 14 different tribes here throughout the years. Now, we know that Native Americans definitely went into caves. We know that because there's a cave in our park, Slaughter Canyon Cave, where there's rock art in the dark zone. So that's the area of the cave where there's no more natural light. Now, they never went into this cave, or at least we've never found any evidence that they went into this cave. And there are many theories. One theory might be because the drop-off was so steep at that entrance that's not worth risking their lives to come down here. So then it wouldn't be until years later. So there's a young boy in Texas growing up. And at a very young age, he wants to be a cowboy. That's what he wants to do ever since he was a little boy. But his father said, son, before you embark on this cowboy journey, you need to complete your third grade education. He says, okay. So he completes his third grade education. His father brings him out to New Mexico, which at the time isn't even a state, still territory. Drops him off, and he decides to do some ranching. So he does some ranching all the way until he's 16 years old. And one night, he thinks he sees smoke in the distance. On exploring that smoke, it turns out it's bats coming out of the cave. So this is Jim White, just a young 16-year-old boy. And right away he wanted to see, with all those bats coming out, there must be a whale of a cave down there. So he wanted to check it out. So he made himself a makeshift ladder out of some fence posts and barbed wire and started exploring. A lot of exploring of the cave he did on his own. Out of the 40 miles of cave that we know of, he explored about half of that. About 20 of the 40 miles he explored. Now he wanted everybody to see this cave. He was so impressed. But he had a real hard time trying to convince people that this cave was indeed real. Now this wouldn't be the first time this would happen for a proposed park. Yellowstone National Park, before that became a park, the stories of the geysers and the thermal features were too much for people to believe. In fact, a man tried to write a newspaper article about Yellowstone. They said, sorry, sir, we don't print fiction here. So a similar thing happened here. Nobody really could believe that Jim White, the story of the cave. The few people that did believe, they had dollar signs in their eyes and said, okay, how can we make money from this? Has everyone had a chance to see?
Did you guys see it?
There you go. Yeah. We'll pass it in the back row now. So they decided to mine in the cave. Any idea what they would have mined?
One.
Very good, guano. That's the bat poop. Now, why would they mine that? Fertilizer. Very good. It's very high in phosphorus and nitrogen, so it makes real good fertilizer. So it was shipped on the trains to go to California for the orange groves for making orange juice. But even doing all that, Jim White participated in the guano mining, but it wasn't that profitable. In the 20 years that they did the mining here, there were 6 different companies that were each trying to make it rich. The few people that Jim White could convince about there being more cave, he would bring them further in. but he was still having a tough time trying to bring people into the cave. But if you wanted to see this cave back then, it was going to be a 3-day trip. Nowadays, just a short little 40-minute drive from the town of Carlsbad to get to the park. But back then, it took much longer. The roads were very rough, especially from White City to the park. For one, you had to go up a very steep hill, so you had to drive your car backwards up the hill to make sure the gas would reach the tank. And then you'd probably have to change a tire or two along the way because the road was real rough. Once you'd finally make it to the park here, you'd stay with Jim White and his wife. His wife would cook you a nice home-cooked meal and then stay the night. The next morning, you would go through the cave, and it would take the whole day to see the cave. Now, dynamite would be used years later to help improve the cave, but with no dynamite being used yet, it was quite a feat getting all the way down to the bottom of the big room. For starters, the only way in and out was in a guano bucket. So 1 to 2 people at a time, and you get pulled down into the cave. So that's how you got in. And because that dynamite hadn't been used yet to make the trail easier, instead of just a gradual decline in the main corridor like it is now, it was much more up and over. The section about halfway down, or is halfway down the main corridor, Devil's Den. That's a tunnel you go through. But back then you'd have to go all the way up and over there. So it would take a very long time to get to the big room. And of course you'd want to see the big room, and then no elevators yet. So you have to go back up the same way. So it would take a full day to see the cave, so you'd stay that night and then leave the next day. Now Jim White would charge $2 a person, which is about $30 adjusted for inflation in today's money. Well, that's a pretty good deal if you think about it, because you got the 2-night stay, all meals provided, and a private tour. Later on, when it would become a park, it would also be $2, but it wouldn't come with the food or the lodging. Now, Jim White finally was able to convince a man by the name of Ray V. Davis to take pictures of the cave. These pictures made it into newspapers and magazines, and eventually the White House saw these pictures. They came out to survey the cave. They didn't even finish surveying the cave. They got through the main corridor, and they're like, "Is that it?" It's like, "No, you still have to see the big room." They're like, "We've seen enough." So in 1923, we became a national monument. Now, the reason why we were a national monument before we were a national park has to do with the Antiquities Act. This allows any president to set land aside without having to go through Congress. So that's why a lot of parks will start out as monuments to get that initial protection. A good example of that, the Grand Canyon started out as a national monument so it could get that initial protection. But we didn't stay a monument for too long. By 1930, we were a national park. Now I want to talk about some of the first 3 superintendents that we had here. The first one we had, Willis T. Lee. He was here for 6 months, so a very short time. But during that time, he led the expedition down to Lower Cave for National Geographic. Nobody had really been to Lower Cave. He went with Jim White. And at first he was going to go with his son, but with his daughter going to be working up on the surface, Elizabeth. But Elizabeth wanted to go exploring in the cave. She was an artist, so she was very important to the expedition for surveying, as well as she could fit through some of the spots in the cave that the men couldn't. After those 6 months, W.F. McIlvaine took over for 3 years. During those 3 years, we see that all of the trails put in, the lighting, the bathrooms. And to make it easier to get in and out of that natural entrance, no more guano bucket, now there's a set of wooden stairs. After those 3 years, that was it. And then we had Thomas Bowles, who was here for 19 years, probably the longest superintendent we'll ever have. He originally started, he was from Arkansas. He wanted to get a job at Hot Springs National Park. He couldn't find a job there, but he saw one here at Carlsbad Caverns. One of the first things he did was put in the elevators. So in 1932, the elevators are put into the cave, make it much easier. Now you don't have to walk up every time. He also did a lot for programs. So he started the BAT program, a program we still do to this day. And the program that ended up being his downfall was something called Rock of Ages. So in the big room, there's a formation called Rock of Ages, named by Jim White because it's such a large formation. Now at this time, it was still guided tours were being done through the big room. So when the tour would get to the big room, or to the Rock of Ages, the lights would be turned off and the Rock of Ages song would be sung. And it was a very popular program. But unfortunately from higher up eventually, they said we need to stop doing that program. It's too much entertainment, not enough interpretation. But Thomas Bowles really loved to keep doing that, so he kept doing it. So eventually they had to let him go.
Oh my God.
They transferred him over to Hot Springs National Park, which is where he originally wanted to work. But the thing is, he'd been here so long, similar to Jim White, he had fallen in love with the cave. Now, he would come back years later, but he would never work in the park. He would work in the town of Carlsbad as a potash miner. So that's some of the early history, some of the first people that helped to influence the cave. Any questions so far? Well, welcome to the papoose room. We call it that because of this formation right here. Kind of looks like a mother with a baby on her back. You might see it, you might not. Sometimes you can see it. Let's move over here in the shadow sometimes. Might look like it in the shadow. All right, we'll talk about some of the formations here. Now, what's it called when a formation is dripping from the ceiling?
Stalactite.
Yeah, stalactite, and a way to remember that, holding tight to the ceiling. Water is dripping very slow, so it's going to leave that calcite behind up here. What happens when it's growing from the bottom up?
Stalagmite.
You might, because you might trip over it. This is formed when the water is going to drip too fast for the calcite to accumulate up here, so it's going to grow from the bottom up. What happens when they meet?
It's a column.
Column, very good. We have some really long, skinny ones here. What are these called?
Soda straws?
Soda straws. And if you think of soda straws, they're hollow in the middle, right? Same thing with these guys. They're hollow. They grow like a ring. However, sometimes the calcite can jam them up, and they can become stalactites. Now, some of these stalactites could have easily started out as soda straws. If we turn our attention to the other side, what's this called? Any idea? Yeah, curtain or a drapery. Formed from the water dripping on an angle, leaving that calcite behind. This is the same thing here, but it's something else because of this color here.
Bacon?
Bacon, very good. You'll notice the bacon in our cave is pretty fatty. We also have formations on top of these formations, all over the ground here, all up on the ceiling. Quite a bit of this in our cave. What's this called? Popcorn, very good. Two different ways popcorn can form, from water splashing or as simple as the calcite being evaporated away. Water evaporating away and leaving that calcite behind. We will talk about another formation in the next room. Any questions? Yes. Yeah, right here. Yeah. You have a question?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Wait,
Oh, gotcha.
Is that drapery up there?
That is a draper, yeah. Anyone have a question? Oh, yeah, for sure. So this is a Brazilian blue-tailed bass here. No longer with us anymore. But is a full-grown adult.
Tiny.
Oh yeah, very small, only weigh about a few nickels. They can stretch the rings out, 1 foot wingspan to wingspan. But yeah, conveniently land in that triangle. And then feel free to explore this room. Don't go past the end there. And then take a seat when you're ready. We've got a Brazilian free-tailed bat here. No longer with us anymore, but that is a full-grown adult. Conveniently there in the triangle. No longer with us anymore, but that is a full-grown adult. Conveniently No, with the wings out, it'd be 1 foot. Yeah, wingspan would be 1 foot. Yeah, once we're done checking out this back, feel free to explore this room. Don't go past the end of there and take a seat.
So this is called the Queen's Room. The whole thing, this whole place used to be kind of free tour like the big room was, but apparently they had a whole bunch of vandalism going on in here, and people were pulling stalactites off the walls and stuff like that, and they decided to return this to being tours only. This formation is still growing, right?
Yeah, that one is, you'll notice that ice cream cone that we hold in there, that is very active. And one of the ways you can know is because it's very white. So the very white, shiny formations are still growing. And a lot of times, some of these other formations are covered up in dust. They get dirty. So especially these, you can see the formations around the one that's growing are not active anymore. Alright, so we're going to be turning off the lights here. So it is a requirement. You have to sit down for this just for safety precautions. Find a seat. There's plenty of room that you can use. Before we turn off the lights, I have a question for you. Are bats blind? No? Yeah? Got some yeses, some no's? No? Well, we'll find out. Alright, here we go. So if anyone has any lights, anything coming from their watch or anything like that, just make sure to cover that up. So bats are actually not blind. Their vision is very good, just about the same as ours, even a little bit slightly better than ours. However, it doesn't really matter when you're in a cave like this in complete darkness because nobody can see. So bats will use echolocation. They'll emit a very high frequency clicking or squeaking noise. It's going to bounce off a formation and then bounce off that to their ears. And this happens very quickly, just milliseconds. But it has to be fast because they don't want to run into anything. They will also use this echolocation when they leave the cave to help find their favorite food, which is the moths. Now, moths are going to be their favorite food because it's going to be the highest calories. So now what we're going to do is just take a minute or two to be as quiet as we can, to really listen to the cave and experience what it's like to be a bat in the cave during the day. Well, what do you think? Would you like to be a bat?
Be a good place to sleep.
Yeah. It would be nice to sleep in this, that's for sure. Alright, we'll be turning these lights back on here. Here we go. Alright. Stalactites. helictite of an inch. Now we know a lot of things when it comes to caves, but there's also a lot we don't know. So I like to call these the mysterious formations because we don't know how they occur. Still a mystery to us. There's different theories, but at the end of the day, we're really not sure. And as we go to the next stop, we're going to find more of these. We're going to look at these much closer. A nice view of these, and then the candy-colored tape will show you where there's more bats. So we'll check out a few more bats as we make our way. So yeah, take some time, check out the helictites. You won't see these really in the big room. Any questions?
What are some of the theories about how they grow?
Yeah, one of the theories is the wind theory, but I don't know about that one because they're all going in different directions.
Is there any bacteria growing?
I'm not sure. I know I've heard of bacteria growing in some spots, but for those, I haven't heard anything about that for this way. The next stop, we're going to try to determine if we're looking at one formation or two.
You did? This looks familiar. We were here. We were just on the other side. Welcome back to the King's Palace. We were here. Welcome back to the King's Palace. We were here. You were just on the other side, right over here. Now the question is whether or not we're looking at one formation or two formations here. What do you guys think?
It's one formation.
One?
One. It's about to become a column.
Yeah,
Anyone think it's two?
it's one.
Think it's one?
Getting
So originally,
close.
it's tough for sure. Originally, they said that this is one formation, and it was called the Eternal Kiss. Really nice. Later on, though, they kind of thought maybe it's not. So they took a ladder One of the rangers propped it against the formation and was just barely able to slip a little piece of paper through. So it's actually not quite touching. So there's two different formations. And so they had to change the name from Eternal Kiss to Frustrated Lovers. Now the question is, will it ever reach? Well, water is still dripping in the cave, but with only 5 to 10% of the cave still active, and it's not dripping right now, probably not. Now it could start dripping later in the future, but as right now it's not dripping. If it did start to drip, it could be 500 years before it grows an inch. So it's a very, very slow process. So this formation is over 7 feet long. It's the longest soda straw here in the cave. Not the longest in the world. There's some that's actually over 30 feet long. But still very impressive, over 7 feet long, and it is still growing. Still an active formation. And once we're done checking out this formation, we can just go a little bit further down the trail. Yeah, longest soda straw here in the cave, a little over 7 feet long. Still very shy, but we can still see the back end of it. Now this one on that trail just a little bit, about before it turns there.
All right, well, the video actually got interrupted, not because I ran out of battery space, but because I actually filled up my SD card. I guess that means this is going to probably be one of my longer videos, but you know what? That's what the benefit is when I reduce the amount of videos that I do. It means that you get to see a whole blast of them when I hit them at once, and you also get a possibility of seeing very, very long videos. I usually try and make it a minimum of 8 minutes and maybe 30 minutes at the most, and in the past, if I had videos that went longer than that, we broke it up into several chunks. That's not going to happen in this case. So anyway, that was really a lot of fun. I hope you had a good time doing that. I know I did. I had fun doing it. I learned a lot in the process. And I'm glad I got a chance to do this again. I'll have to come back at some point when it's warmer out so we can see the bats, because they've all hibernated and gone to Mexico now. But I think we're coming to the end of our video today. So thank you as always for watching, and I'll see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.